Recent data from the Palestinian Ministry of Health in Gaza indicates that at least 37,266 individuals have died as a result of the strikes, almost 15,000 of whom are minors. Over 85,102 have been injured, and about 10,000 remain missing. Furthermore, based on the most recent information provided by the World Health Organization, the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, and the Palestinian government, as of June 9th, Israeli attacks had caused damage to over 50% of Gaza's residential properties, 80% of commercial establishments, 88% of school buildings, 16 out of 35 hospitals that were only partially operational, 130 ambulances, and 267 places of worship. This is not the end of it. Israel is said to kill about 1,000 children and newborns every week on average. The number of children that are targeted and killed is staggering, according to Gaza's Hamas-run Ministry of Health. And then there are the premature babies who have perished as a result of contaminated formula water, since Israel won't let fresh water into Gaza after Hamas invaded Israel on October 7th and committed atrocities. Born in Tel Aviv, Israel on October 21, 1949, Benjamin Netanyahu was raised in Jerusalem. He lived in the Philadelphia region for the majority of his teenage years when his father, renowned Jewish historian Benjamin Netanyahu, was employed as a professor. After enlisting in the Israeli military in 1967, he was part of the Special Operations Team that in 1972 successfully retrieved a hijacked aircraft at the Tel Aviv airport. After that, he pursued his studies at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, pausing in 1973 to fight in Israel during the Yom Kippur War. Benjamin established the Jonathan Institute, which funded terrorist seminars after his brother Jonathan passed away in 1976 while overseeing the successful Entebbe raid. Before Netanyahu was chosen as a Likud member of the Israeli parliament, the Knesset, in 1988, he served as ambassador on multiple occasions. He was a deputy minister in Prime Minister Yitzhak Shamir's coalition cabinet from 1991 to 1992, after serving as the Minister of Foreign Affairs from 1988 to 1991. He handily defeated Shamir in the 1993 election to become the Likud party's leader. After taking the helm of the right-wing Likud party in 1993, Netanyahu went on to hold several stints as prime minister. Netanyahu gained reputation for opposing the Israeli withdrawals that followed the 1993 peace accords between Israel and the PLO from West Bank and Gaza Strip. Following the killing of Yitzhak Rabin in November 1995 by a Jewish extremist and a string of suicide bombings by Muslim militants early in 1996, the ruling Labour Party faced diminished electoral appeal going into the 1996 elections. In the first ever direct election of a prime minister, Netanyahu defeated Prime Minister Shimon Peres by a narrow margin of approximately 1% on May 29, 1996. On June 18th, Netanyahu formed a government, making him the youngest prime leader in Israel's history. Significant Likud gains were made in the February 2009 election, as Netanyahu guided the party to 27 Knesset members, finishing one seat behind Tzipi Livni's Kadima. However, it was not immediately apparent which party's leader would be called to form a coalition administration due to the close and unambiguous nature of the results. Following days of coalition talks, Netanyahu secured the backing of Shas with 11 seats, Yisrael with 15 seats, and other smaller parties. The Israeli president then invited Netanyahu to form the cabinet, which took office on March 31, 2009. Following the hearing in October 2019, Netanyahu was indicted in cases 1,000, 2,000, and 4,000 on allegations of fraud, receiving bribes, and breach of trust on November 21st. Netanyahu was legally compelled to resign from all of his cabinet positions other than prime minister following the indictment. On November 1st, 2022, Israel held legislative elections to choose the 120 members of the 25th Knesset. The results showed that the far right had made advances while the left-wing and Arab parties had lost ground to the right-wing national camp, led by former Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Massive demonstrations against Netanyahu's proposed revamp of the court, which opponents claimed undermined the government's separation of powers, shook the first few months of his term. Netanyahu is good friends with former Italian Prime Minister Silvio Berlusconi. He is close to Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban. Netanyahu is well liked by Russian President Vladimir Putin. Netanyahu has connections with current U.S. President Joe Biden and close relations to the U.S. Republican Party leadership and its 2012 presidential nominee, Mitt Romney. Netanyahu and former U.S. President Donald Trump have known each other for a long time. This ideology explains the mindset of Netanyahu and his policies towards his neighboring countries. Let's first dive into its history briefly for the better understanding of his actions. Vladimir Jabotinsky, a well-known Zionist activist, published On the Iron Wall in 1923. In it, he outlined his vision for the path the Zionist movement should take to achieve its ultimate goal, the establishment of an independent Jewish state in Palestine, which was then ruled by the British. The Zionist leadership was criticized by Jabotinsky for neglecting the political aspirations of the Arab majority in Palestine. Jabotinsky believed the notion to be essentially false. Like all local populations throughout history, the Arabs of Palestine, according to Jabotinsky, would never accept the national ambitions of another people in their own country. For control of the land, Jabotinsky thought that Zionism, as a Jewish national movement, would have to fight the Arab national movement. Jabotinsky said that the Zionist movement ought not to invest its funds on idealistic aspirations for society and the economy. The only goal of Zionism should be to build a military force of the Jewish people, a sort of iron wall, to force the Arabs to recognize a Jewish state on their ancestral territory. The United Nations partition plans for Palestine, which called for splitting it into independent Jewish and Palestinian Arab governments, were approved by David Ben-Gurion and the Zionist establishment in 1947. Accepting the proposal served the Zionists' purpose of ensuring that the Jewish state would be established with such widespread international backing. The revisionists led by Jabotinsky were against any division plan because they were against any geographical compromise. They opposed the acknowledgement of an Arab state, a non-Jewish political entity, inside the borders of Palestine. Israel and its Arab neighbors fought a regional war after Israel declared its independence in 1948. More than half of the Palestinian inhabitants of the territory Israel claimed were driven from their homes or fled during the conflict, which started as soon as the United Nations decided to partition the country and lasted until 1949. After the war, the ancient region of Palestine was partitioned, with the newly formed State of Israel claiming and controlling roughly 80% of it. Egypt ruled the Gaza Strip, while Jordan ruled the West Bank and East Jerusalem. Since then, Netanyahu has conducted a vast and ruthlessly destructive assault against Hamas and Gaza, which is the fundamental expression of the Iron Wall. The use of overwhelming force to convey that a territorial settlement with the Arabs over ancient Palestine is not possible. Alternatively, as Netanyahu has stated time and time again in recent weeks, there won't be a ceasefire until Israel has achieved total victory. Rabin worked with Yasser Arafat, the leader of the Palestinians, to arrange the Oslo Accords in 1993. The men shook hands as a sign of the Arab-Israeli conflict being resolved. As a step toward the long-term objective of establishing two states, Israel and a Palestinian state, that would peacefully coexist, the agreement established Palestinian sovereignty in the West Bank and Gaza Strip. Benjamin Netanyahu had taken over as the Likud party's leader in the same year. He saw attempts at eradication of Jewish history by groups as diverse as the Romans, the Spanish Inquisition, the Nazis, and the Arab world. Netanyahu viewed the Oslo peace process as a form of compromise on territory. He believed that making agreements would only lead to confrontation and that displaying weakness would be terrible. Here we are presenting a short overview of Benjamin Netanyahu's psychological reach and mental ability. For nearly 25 years, Kimhi, a Tel Aviv University professor, has examined Netanyahu's thoughts. Kimhi's behavioral research of Netanyahu revealed a troubling pattern of behavior in 1999, the year when the leader's first tenure as premier would come to an end. Among his conclusions were that Netanyahu reacted badly under pressure and was egotistical, entitled, and paranoid. When Kimhi looked into Netanyahu again in 2017, not much had changed. According to Kimhi, people's behaviors tend to grow more extreme as they become older. Netanyahu's narcissism and paranoia have increased. According to Kimhi's investigation, he has no faith in anyone outside of his close family and puts his personal future above all else. One may argue that Netanyahu's entitlement and paranoia have influenced his opinions on a Palestinian state. Even while he has stated in the open that he is in favor of a two-state solution, he has obstructed the process at every opportunity, stating, for example, that a Palestinian state should not have any military or security control over its territory. Under his leadership, political repression of Palestinians is pervasive, and settlement expansion has thrived. Through the Abraham Accords, Netanyahu has attempted to evade the establishment of a Palestinian state by forging regional accords with Arab nations. In the face of persistent difficulties, let us draw strength from compassion and solidarity. May we regard one another as fellow humans who are worthy of decency, honor, and harmony. Let's work together to create a future in which peace and understanding rule the day, and every child's giggle conveys a world of safety and optimism.